Here's something you don't normally see on my channel, a foam sword. I've never done LARP, I have no interest in it, and I've never had any reason to get one of these. But I was contacted by Calimacil, the maker of this sword here, and asked, hey, do you want to make a video about this? We would be interested in your opinion. And so I was kind of curious. So what are these actually like? Do they have any potential for HEMA practice or any other application? And since the only thing they asked me to do is include the logo in the video and link to the sword in the video description, I figured, why not? Might as well try it out and see what it's like. This is the Highlander by Calimacil. It's a historical design and it looks quite similar to original claymores in overall shape. A lot of the details as well, I'll get to that later. The core is a fiberglass rod, which is reinforced at the tip with fiber braided polyurethane tube to prevent the rod from poking through the foam. It's made of expanded polymer foam. It does not contain any latex. From what I understand, most LARP weapons have latex, which requires special maintenance, talcum powder and whatnot. I don't know what the maintenance routines are, but none of that is necessary with this stuff here. And it seems pretty strong, so you can twist it around pretty violently and it returns back to its shape. It might get a little wrinkly on the surface, but it really seems very strong, so the edges can collapse easily for safety. And the entire thing flexes, like not only in the direction of the flat. In fact, towards the flat, not so much. It actually flexes less than some steel swords towards the flat, but it does have some give in the direction of the edge. So that definitely helps if you strike anything and it deforms on impact. That absorbs a lot of the force. So that makes this generally pretty safe. I'd say generally because I'm a little surprised by how thin the edge is for a LARP sword. I mean, in a way it's nice because that makes it look a little, well, not necessarily that much more realistic because it's still a pretty thick sword, of course, and there's no way that even at first glance you could mistake this for a real sword unless you're in desperate need of prescription glasses. But it just makes it overall look more appealing in that it has this taper towards a relatively thin edge. However, I'm wondering just how safe that is, especially considering that the edge is kind of rough. I'll show you a close-up here. There are a few spots which almost feel a little bit, well, not really sharp, but rough. So I wonder if that might possibly be able to tear skin in a worst case scenario. I mean, even duct tape can have that sort of effect on practice weapons, but this is just me speculating. I have no idea, I haven't used this. But overall, it definitely seems safe. In terms of thrusts, well, the point here flexes a lot. This bends over all the way to 90 degrees and even further. After that, it doesn't have that much flex. Now, for LARP purposes, I'm sure that's fine. If I wanted to use this for HEMA practice, for those who don't know, that's historical European martial arts, that might be a bit of a problem because there is a difference in the thrust between doing something like this. That would be a fairly weak thrust, and stepping into the thrust. So if you really step into the thrust with your entire body weight, it's much more powerful. And I'm not sure I would be comfortable with something like this necessarily. I mean, it has flex, but a very powerful thrust while stepping in might be a bit much. But again, I haven't tried this. The other thing, of course, is I wouldn't recommend a murder stroke because this pommel is rather solid. Even though the thing flexes, if you were to strike somebody like that, that would not be a fun time for them. But I mean, in most situations you wouldn't anyway. The guard is very flexible, so that makes it sort of useless for HEMA practice, but good for its intended purpose, which is LARP. So these things you can also really abuse apparently. Like you can twist that around all kinds of ways and just try to tear it off and it still holds up. I mean, if I wanted to, I could rip this off if I tried hard, because I can hear something, starts tearing in there. But it sounds like it, but I mean, that's not exactly what would normally happen on a LARP event. At least I think somebody running around trying to rip off people's guards would be kicked out fairly soon. So that's not really an issue. On the grip here, there are these knobs. I mean, those are apparently meant to resemble rivets. I'm personally not a fan of that. It feels really weird. It doesn't really do that much for traction, but it feels kind of strange on the hands. However, what I like about this is the level of detail. The fake wood grain comes out really nicely. At first glance, this really looks like wood if you don't touch it. So that is pretty interesting. I mean, even if you touch it at first, you could possibly mistake it for wood aside from how light it is. But it looks really good. Also, there's some detail on the guard here. This, in fact, I've seen on a real claymore in a museum. Some very similar decorations, so I'm assuming that that's what they referenced. So that is really quite nice to see. The beveled shape here on the guard, that makes it look more interesting. The pommel is fairly intricate. You can see these decorations here. The blade also looks really good for what it is. As said, the blade has to be pretty thick for the padding to do its job, but it still has a fairly refined shape. It's got a fuller here, and it's pretty much a lenticular cross section. The edges are more lightly colored, so that makes it look like the polished edge. It would be a little wider than usual on a steel sword, but you can see it better this way. And yeah, so artistically, that looks really quite nice. There are a few cases, like right here, where the seam is a little bit rough, but otherwise it's definitely a good job. So for use as a LARP weapon, I'm assuming it's good. Again, I don't have first-hand experience, so I can't say for sure. But it definitely seems light enough, it seems to flex enough, at least for light thrusts, and definitely for strikes shouldn't be a problem. Aside from the rough edge here, I don't see any issues with it. If you wanted to use that for martial arts practice, I don't think this is the right tool. I mean, for one, it is extremely light. I'll show you the weight. 572 grams or 20 ounces. For comparison, here's a padded training sword made by XZL. Still need to get around to reviewing that one. So this is about 1.17 kilos, 41.4 ounces, and a synthetic sword for HEMA practice. This one has 1.3 kilograms or about 46 ounces. So it's essentially a fourth of the weight of a real claymore and about a third of a longsword. And when you're dealing with so little mass, it limits quite a bit what you can do. A lot of the techniques wouldn't really work, or wouldn't work the same way because of how differently it would behave in the bind, especially in parries. I mean, those would probably bind reasonably well edge to edge, but I don't think this would be a great training tool. But again, it's not designed for that. So for what it is, seems good as far as I can tell. But keep in mind, I cannot make any statements about the durability because I haven't used it and have no plans to do so. So just take it for what it's worth, and thanks for watching.